Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Micah. I'll be your astrologer for today. And we are finally on the second to last video for the Midas series. I cannot believe we are almost done with this series. The last video will be Midas and Aries. Um, and then we'll be all done with Midas. I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. Jobs that these people can usually be found in with Midas in Pisces. As you might have guessed, people with Midas in Pisces, they're usually people that can really attract abundance through intuition, compassion, or just kind of like their creative gifts. Pisces is very romantic and creative and imaginative. And so money can flow when they really trust their intuition and dreams and just kind of like their calling. Because Neptune in general is a lot about that Jupiter, like Neptune conjunction, or not conjunction, like mix, really creates like this unseen, like purpose. And so those people are when people with Midas and Pisces are really going after that, they tend to just kind of like manifest the money and resources that they need when they're just following their gut and following what they really feel that they need to do. Pisces is also a lot about timing. So sometimes the timing for like them acting to a lot of other people will not make sense. But that's because they're going more on their intuition and acting on things timing wise. But they definitely, like I said, are very creative. And they do stand to make a lot of money in creative fields, like we'll talk about later. But they have a lot of artistic talent, whether it be music, especially like with stringed instruments, dance, film, painting, anything like really, but especially like painting, like watercolor painting, I would imagine is definitely one, as well as music. Neptune is very music oriented, and so they can have this kind of like a special something that really resonates deeply with others when it comes to those creative gifts. Um, Something else to note with Midas and Pisces is that they can generate a lot of income through healing as well. Neptune is water, and so I love the. You might, if anyone has been in class with me, you might have heard me say this before. If you watch Once Upon a Time, there is a line in that show where Pinocchio says, "There's no more magical thing on this earth than water. It heals, it hydrates us, and I think it says like something else. That's the third thing. I can't remember the line right away. I obviously need to rewatch Once Upon a Time, and so but there's a lot of a lot of like healing fields that these people do really well in. And I'm not surprised Neptune can have to do with like places like hospitals or like even mental health places such as uh like uh rehabs or like um what would it be called now psychiatric hospitals. There we go. I was like psychiatric wards. No, that's a part of a hospital. But yeah, like in those kinds of service oriented fields that are more about healing and compassion, as well as just kind of like healing the mind and body. Definitely Midas and Pisces does well in those. It's mostly like places that you find yourself isolated in or you feel isolated in, where both the emotional field and physical field need healing. Midas and Pisces really thrived in. And something else I think with Midas and Pisces is that they have the natural ability to really see beyond um, the surface when it comes to making like things successful. Neptune rules trends. And so like when you see like people just kind of coming up with designs that have not, it's almost like Midas and Aquarius, how we talked about like those are really trendsetters. Part of Pisces is Aquarius, and so we can see Midas and Pisces also really being like one of those trendsetters, or being able to at least pick out what's the next big thing. And so they're great with like design, branding, anything that really requires foresight in that way. I think that's really all I have for like Midas and Pisces as far as like light side or like more positive side.
All right. So when we're talking about the shadow side of Midas and Pisces, there can be some um, tendency to over idealize finances. Um, Believing that money will just kind of like appear. And so they're not the best with budgeting sometimes. I will say that. As a Pisces myself, I get that. There can also be this tendency to kind of spend money before it's in their hand because they're already dreaming and not really like tapping into the tangible. And that can get them into some issues when they do have money. They can kind of spend it before it's even hit their bank account. And then when it doesn't, they're left in kind of like a deficit. And so they just really want to be careful about that, and just make sure they're practically planning for things as well as being realistic about money. Um, there can also be a tendency to escape through spending. These people, like, I think some people would think that Midas and Libra would be the shopaholic. No, it is Midas and, and Pisces, the escapist through retail therapy. Money can definitely slip away when we're talking about luxuries, fantasies, addictions, like especially like with drugs or alcohol and things like that, or just kind of being overly giving to other people. These people are extremely generous. Jupiter and Neptune, like I said, does not have a lot of boundaries. And so when Midas is involved, when we're talking about money, there's not a lot of stopping, like a lot of stopping them when it comes to when they're trying to escape or when they have decided that they're going to give something. There might not be a lot of boundaries if they're not conscious about it. Um, there and like this can be like a issue, especially when we get to into other people coming into the mix. These people can often be exploited with their compassion. Other people can really take advantage of people with Midas and Pisces, and a lot of people that have Midas and Pisces can find themselves in situations where they're constantly getting taken for granted or taken advantage of with their resources, not just with money, but just with their resources, their big heart. And like, how I was even saying before, like they themselves might spend money before they actually get it. But also that can work the other way where other people are constantly borrowing money from them, but they're not seeing a lot of return on the money that they're getting back or that's being repaid. And it's just kind of like other people might have like a running tab with these people, but Midas and Pisces probably will not, unless they've learned to do this, they will not like really like keep track or like make it a big deal unless like some sort of conflict has arisen, and then they'll bring it up. But there can also be difficulty separating spiritual worth from material worth, and that can really lead uh, to either neglect of finances or obsession with wealth as kind of like their saving grace or salvation. They really want to be careful of like lack mentality, or like clinging too much to one extreme or the other of like, oh, I'm just giving everything, or the other extreme would be I'm holding on to everything. And so that is something that Midas and Pisces really has to be careful about, is learning to create those boundaries when it comes to who they're helping, whether it be financially, energetically, whatever. Just having those boundaries, I think, is the biggest thing with Midas and Pisces. All right. So the last thing that I'll say about Midas and Pisces is we're talking about the fields that we can find people with these placements often in. Of course, anything creative, or like artsy, music, dance, film. We talked about all of that, especially film. Film and music are the big ones because those are very Neptunian. Anything that's on a screen or anything that's very like linked to Neptune, which were like ocean like singing. Think of like mermaids. Even like in like mermaiding, they could do really well in with Midas and Pisces. Spiritual fields, so like astrologers, tarot readers, Reiki healers, yoga instructors, they do really well in those fields as well. Like we were saying, so service oriented fields, nonprofits, especially in charities. Neptune can be a lot about, like I said, marginalized communities or isolated communities, especially homeless people. And so I'd say nonprofit because it's more about like what they're giving to a community more than like the for profit. Pisces really isn't about that. It's more about like how can we all kind of clump together and make just kind of one one soul, one big heart. And so something that we didn't talk about with Mice and Pisces is that these people do really well in anything that has to do with sleep. Sleep industry, so like mattress industries or like bedding, or making like bedding and like fashion stuff like that, or like sleep research, hypnotherapy, uh, storytelling, even like especially bedtime stories, or like animation, which is a very Neptune thing as well. They do really well in those fields. Um, Anything that has to do, I think, also with like intuition. And here's something that you might not have thought of, like intuition, like with financing. Um, so like investing, intuitively knowing what to invest in and what to pull out from. These people would be great in that. Brand development, trend forecasting, like we were talking about earlier, and working in industries that kind of predict the future, whether that be like in astrology, tarot, or whatever, or like the stock markets. These people could be really good at. Like I said, there is really no boundary to what these people could do, as like a full-time job or like as a side hustle. And so Midas and Pisces is definitely one of those multifaceted jack of all trades. Um, but other than that, that is all I have for you. Let me know if you have Midas and Pisces. I'd love to hear from you. And I will see you guys in Midas and Aries.